excited today to have our first PowerApps community call. And Audrey and I have been working hard on this call and lining up other folks for future calls as well. So again, thanks for joining us. Audrey, anything to mention?
Thank you and good morning.
All right, I'll take it away from there while you work on that microphone, Audrey. So thanks again, everybody, for coming. This is our first PowerApps community call. But about our community call, you can get to information about the community call at the URL you see here, aka.ms/PowerApps community call. We'll be having this call every month on the third Wednesday, and our next call will be 8 In the call, we're going to follow the format of each month. We'll share with you the latest news and community contributions that people made to the PowerApps community. We'll give you opportunity to meet the product teams behind PowerApps and other experts and folks in the community, and have them on and show you cool tips and tricks and things you do with any Power App you develop, as well as cool demos that showcase how they solved real-world business problems with PowerApps. We will also do technical deep dives, and we'll have Q&A as well. So what we're going to talk about today is we'll introduce ourselves, and then we're going to have a couple different topics. The first one is, what are the PowerApps simple templates and how do you customize them? Quick hacks for using buttons in PowerApps, and then we'll focus on recent news and community activities. And then we'll wrap up with Q&A if we have time to do that today. So again, here's the presenters. That's me on the left, Todd Baginski. I work for Canvas, and there's a link to my blog there and how to reach me on Twitter. And then we also have Audrey Gordon from Microsoft. She is on the PowerApps team, and you can see her Twitter handle there and reach out to her on community.powerapps.com. So we're going to start off talking about the PowerApps sample templates. So the PowerApps sample templates are a bunch of different PowerApps that you can download and use in your organization completely free of charge and get up and running with them right away. You'll find these when you go to web.powerapps.com and click Create an App, and then you can pick from the various templates to make your own. I'm going to show you this process in a bit, but in summary, what are the PowerApps sample templates and how to use them, you can see on the slide here. To use the templates, it's very easy. You just go to web.powerapps.com, click Make This App, like you see in the screenshot on the left there, and that'll open up the app inside of the PowerApps editor. Then all you have to do is save the Power App, follow the instructions that come with the Power App to set it up and configure it for your environment, and then other people, and then any data sources that Power App may be required, you'll need to give those folks access so they can get to that data too. So that's how you use the templates as is to ramp up real quickly. But what if you want to make them your own? And that's what I'm talking about today, is taking them, building upon them, and extending them to meet your specific use cases that you have in your organization. You'll notice all the steps here, they're exactly the same. The only difference is step 4, pardon me, that I've injected here, and that's editing and saving the Power Apps. So really, to use these and make them your own, all you have to do is open them up and start editing the code and then publish them. And voila, now you've got a Power App dialed into your environment doing your business processes that you got a great jump start on by using the template. So I'm going to show you a demo now doing exactly that. Demonstration is worth a million words, so I'm going to go ahead now and turn off my camera here and start demonstrating how you can go ahead and customize a Power App sample template. So let me look back to the beginning like I talked about. Where do you get them? Well, first you go to web.powerapps.com and you click on the Apps section. And then you can click on Create an App here at the top. And then you select the type of app you're looking for. In this case, this is a Canvas app that I'm working with today. And all these PowerApps sample templates at this point in time are Canvas apps. Then what you want to do is go down to this App Templates section here, where it says phone layout or tablet layout. There's many different templates for each layout. I'm going to pick tablet for demonstration purposes here. And here you can see all the different PowerApps sample templates that are available to you. The one that I'm going to customize today is the Shoutouts PowerApp, this one here. So select it and then click Use. At that point, the PowerApp is now getting downloaded into the environment that you have selected. You can see in the top right of my screen here, I have an environment called Demo. So this PowerApp will then be downloaded into that environment, and it will then open up in the editor and allow me to use it. If the PowerApp uses any connections, like you see here, you'll be prompted to allow those connections. After you allow them, it's going to open up the PowerApp inside of the editor, and now you have 100% access to all of the code inside of the PowerApp here. Now, for some of these PowerApps, they rely upon things in OneDrive or other places. And the first time that you open them up, you'll be prompted sometimes to create the file storage for that PowerApp. After you've opened one up, you can then immediately play it, and now you can run through the PowerApp, just like I'm doing here, and actually use it. So it's a fully functional PowerApp right off the bat. So what I'm going to show you now is how do you go ahead and customize one of these and roll that out to your organization. Now, the Shoutouts PowerApp allows you, as you can see here, to send a shout out to people in your organization. Or you could think of it as a kudo, just a little notification that they did a job well done. I'm going to move over to the PowerApp that I've already edited and show you the difference inside of it. But first, before I do that, let's make a shout out. Actually, I'll just go over to the PowerApp I've edited. So this is the same exact PowerApp sample template that I just opened up from web.powerapps.com, except I opened it up about a week ago and I made some changes to it. The changes that I made to it are this capability you see right here in this gray little circle I made that allows you to like a shout out if someone else has given, or see who's liked other shout outs that have been sent out. So for example, I populated this demo PowerApp with some that I've sent to my team, and you can see that nobody has liked this shout out that I sent to Tyler yet, and so I get the option to click on this and like it. On the other hand, several people have liked this shout out I sent to Damien here, so if I click on it, it then pops up pictures of the people who like that shout out. So you can see 3 people like that one and 1 person like this one, and that happened to be me. If I go and I click now on the thumbs up, it's going to actually update the system, and it's going to register that I liked that particular shout out. And now you can see my option to like that shout out is gone. And if I click the link, it shows me, there I am, I like the shout out. So how did I add that to the PowerApp sample template? I'm going to start at the beginning and show you the Excel sheet behind the hood that actually stores the data for the shoutouts in this sample template. If I open this one up, I'll see that I have this sheet right here. This sheet stores the information associated with each shoutout, the message that was sent, if there was an image, when it was created, who created it, so on and so forth. This is the only worksheet that comes with the PowerApps Shoutouts sample template. So to give it the ability to like I needed to have another place to store the data. I created another sheet. And in this sheet, I am storing the primary ID. This is the unique identifier associated with each shoutout. If I come back to the previous page, here you can see that primary D column again. So I'm essentially creating a relationship. Then I have the email of the person who liked it. And that's really all I need to keep track of who liked which shoutout. This PowerApps ID column, I didn't create it. PowerApps creates that particular column for me when it does CRUD operations against this data source. After I've created this other table, what I need to do is I actually need to turn it into a data table. And I actually don't know how that is done in the web version of Excel. So I opened it up in the desktop version of Excel, and I turned this into a data table, and I named that data table likes. So after I had that ready to go, then I came back to my PowerApps sample template, and I went to the data sources area like this, and I clicked Add Data Source. I selected OneDrive, and then I selected the workbook that I'm working with, as well as the data table that I created likes. Remember, that data table is that one that just had those two columns that I added to it, the primary ID for that shout out, as well as the email for the person who liked it. So now I'm connected to that data source and I can use it. Editing the PowerApps sample template and adding your own features is very easy. To add the functionality that I demonstrated for these likes, what I did is first, I went to the middle pane, which is this group you can see with the dots around it here. And first, I added this button to give me that rounded background color. After I did that, I added this image, which is the one we saw. When I liked it, it was that thumbs up. I happen to have another one down here at the bottom, right here. So that is that like image that I put in there. And what I want to do is I want to make sure when I click that like button that I'm going to go update Excel and say the current user liked this shout out. So the way that I do that is like this. I call the patch function. I tell it the data source I want to update, and then I pass in the default for likes for the record, and I fill out the primary ID, which is this item because I'm in a gallery, it's primary ID column. So wherever I click this like button inside of my gallery, it's going to take the primary ID for that shout out, and then the current user's email, and there's those two columns that we saw inside of the Excel sheet. So that allows me to essentially put the data in the Excel sheet to say somebody liked it. Now, in addition to that, I wanted to make sure that someone could only like something one time. So I put in a little bit of logic here inside of the visible statement. You can see I've put comments inside of there to explain what's happening. First, I find out if the current user liked the shout out by counting the rows of the filtered likes data source, where the creator email is equal to the current user's email, and the primary ID is equal to the primary ID of the shout out that is inside of the gallery for this row. If that's greater than 0, then I know they already liked it, so I'm going to set the visibility property to false. If they did like it, I'm going to set it to true. I just hid the button altogether here. You could also use another visualization of that thumbs up to maybe make it look disabled or grayed out, and then toggle the visibility of two different images at the same time. Finally, the next piece of the puzzle is the number of likes. And you'll notice how I have it say one person likes this when one person liked it, or it changes to 3 people like this, and my grammar updates a little bit there to be correct. You'll also notice down here at the bottom, if nobody liked it, I say be the first to like this. So to actually do that with my number of likes, this is what my text looks like to display that. You can see that I'm using an if statement. Did more than one person like it? Yes. Display how many people liked it. Did a single person like it? If it's equal to 1, yes, a single person liked it, so change the string to like that. If neither one is those the case, nobody liked it yet, emit that text right there. So as you can see, the things that I'm doing to this are no different than what you normally do when you write your own Power App from scratch. I just enhanced it and added on more to it. I also have that ability to show my pop-up. And my pop-up, when I select that particular text on how many people like it, what I'm doing is saying, if I click it, check if anyone liked it. If anyone liked it is greater than 0, then I'm going to set this global variable I clicked called show who liked equal to true. If that's true, everything in this new group I made.
Todd?
Yes?
We have some folks who are saying that you can't see your screen anymore.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Let me try to reshare it. Thanks for letting me know. Is it back up?
It is back.
All right. So thank you, Brian. I'm going to reset here on this one I was describing. So this is the code that fires when I click on the text that says how many people have liked it. And the first thing I'll do is figure out, did anyone like the shout out I just clicked on? And if so, then I'm going to set this global variable show who liked equal to true. Now, everything in this group over here called the who liked pop-up that I created, and that is the one that I will go ahead and click one of them so we can see it now and then return to the editor. All these controls in the who liked pop-up are driven off of that global variable that says, are they visible or not? So I have one for my darkened background. I have a button because I wanted rounded corners. As you can see here for my background, the button really doesn't do anything, just serves as a background. I have a gallery of who liked the shout out. Here's where I actually wrote a little code. I filter the likes for the currently selected shout out and then display them here. And then I have how many people liked it here. Just more code that counts up how many people like this particular shout out. And then finally, I have the button to close the gallery, and when I click it, it sets show who liked back to false. And so all those controls, because their visibility is set to show who liked variable, will then disappear at that point in time. And so I know this is a very simple example, and there may be ways you could refactor this code a little bit more to be more efficient. But I wrote it in such a way here because I'm going to share this app after the call so that it's very straightforward to understand the code and a very good example you can pick up and use in your own organization as well. So that's just one way you can take the PowerApps sample templates and quickly and easily enhance them so they do more things for you, like you see here. While we're on the topic of working with a Power App that works with Excel, I'd like to point out, if you open up this Excel sheet like this inside of the web browser, or you open it in Excel and you leave it open, when you come back to your Power App and you try to use your Power App, for example, I will click the button at the bottom to be the first person to like this shout out. When I click that button, we're going to watch it fail. And at the top of the screen, we're going to get a message that it can't write to the Excel sheet because it's currently locked for editing. Now, because I'm in preview mode, I don't see that message appear right there. I will see it appear as a red dot here. There it is. And if I look at the red dot here, we can inspect the message. See how it says the requested resource is locked? So that's something to keep in mind as you work with Excel Power Apps as well. After you close it, you may have to wait a minute or so until you can come back to your Power App and use it again. So Audrey is going to build upon that here, and she's going to talk about how do you optimize button operations inside of a Power App. Audrey?
I'm going to hope and pray that you guys can now hear and see me. That's what I'm going to do. Let's see. Can you hear
We can
me?
hear you great.
We could hear you loud
we
and
can
clear.
hear you perfect.
And can you see me too? Not that that's necessary.
I cannot
but-
see your camera. It might be off.
Okay. Nope, not a problem. Let me share a screen instead. So a couple of things I want to say while I'm getting ready to share a screen is there were a couple of questions I want to address. And then if anybody has a question about what Todd just did, let's pop that in the chat and cover it before I move on to the next thing. Todd, that was an excellent demonstration. You know, I just thought that there are so many opportunities that we have to use likes. And I think that we kind of hesitate to do it because we don't know how to configure it. I know that was my case in the beginning. But, you know, you just showed how easy that can be. Let me know if you guys, when and if you guys see my screen.
We can see your screen.
Great.
Can't see the screen.
Awesome. So one question that was in the chat is when should we use Excel over SharePoint, right? And you know, this is a question it's dear to my heart, right? How do I pick my data source? How do I pick where I store my data? Now, we have kind of picked for you when it comes to these templates. And the reason is because that's the easiest for us to kind of clone and give to you because we don't have access to your tenant to like connect to your SharePoint site and such. So a lot of our templates are built on Excel just for ease of share, like how we can share to the whole world. But how you pick your data source totally depends on what your requirements are. And you want to think about that carefully. There really isn't a perfect data source for anything. It's just, you know, understand them individually. So SharePoint has a different, I would say, audience than say Excel. Usually I notice with Excel, you know, they're working either from OneDrive or from a library, and they may have a limited number of users involved in that, and maybe a whole lot less concurrent users in an Excel situation. Whereas, you know, I noticed in SharePoint, people like the idea of putting it in context with their collaboration, right? Everybody already knows SharePoint. It's an old product. We're used to it. And so there's less training. So sometimes we'll put data in SharePoint just because of its familiarity within the business. You may choose SQL in some cases, or CDS, which is our platform of choice when it comes to enterprise applications. So I will give you a little promise here that topic is so big, we're actually going to have a whole podcast on that topic alone, how to pick data sources. But for today, recognize that the reason we picked Excel for you for some of these templates is just because it makes it easier for us to share them out to you. It's not because we picked Excel as the best data source in any way. We're not comparing it to anything. We're just using it for flexibility. Also, I want you, when you think about these templates like shout outs, get creative a little bit. Those of you that are running user groups, think about ways you can take these templates and use them in entirely different scenarios. So in a shout out, you're giving someone a badge, right? And we give you some really cool badges you can give out. And you're also able to give a comment, and I think also a picture. So what are some other scenarios that fits in? I know that many organizations, their HR teams give out human resources rewards. That could be used for that as well. Or you're nominating people for MVP in your company, right? Or you're nominating people for leadership awards, and you want to give that nomination and share a badge. And you can change the badges. They can look like your own company icons. So think out of the box when it comes to the templates, and you'll be surprised what you can come up with. I've seen a lot of interesting scenarios on all of our templates that don't necessarily reflect what they were intended for. So with that thought, Todd talked a lot about button. You know, like when we click on that like in his in his app, he's actually made that icon a button so that people could click on it and do things. And so I figured, let's talk a little bit about buttons so that maybe you guys can end up being button experts by the end of this discussion. So one thing I want to point out is you can get buttons from the individual link right here on the insert menu, as well as within controls. All right, so we have a little bit of redundancy there. So whichever is easier for you, we find that most people are using the one that's visible, but you're always welcome to take any of these choices. Using the control drop down will give you all the possibilities. And sometimes I encourage people to take a peek at that just to make sure you know about all those possibilities, right? So when I drop a button down, here's an interesting concept. I can make a button, right? Or I think in the case, Ty, you made an icon a button, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, a big difference with that decision, right? So I can take any icon and make it a button. I can even make text a button. And this is in the ABCs of buttons. The first thing you think about when you think of a button is action. Something's going to happen when I click on it, right? I'm going to provoke an action. And this is a little bit different than the way we think about actions in flow. So I figured I'd call out these words a little bit so you get it. It just means something's going to happen. And back in the day, we used to call this on click, and now we call it on select. So anything basically can have an on select property. But what's the difference between a button and, say, using an icon? Well, a button has several properties that the icon or other options may not. And I want to point out my 3 favorite properties in button. So, of course, it's kind of redundant for me to say the on select, because that's the most important part of a button, what's going to happen when I click it. But a couple of other things that are interesting are the hover fill. So when I'm hovering over this, you can see the finger that appears. That finger has a different shading on the button. So if you look at that very carefully, and I'll just run it so it's a little easier. I was holding down my Alt key, but if you notice, there's a different shade of the same color. It's not a different color, it's a different shade. And you get the finger icon, which means that if I have a touch screen, I could tap it as well as use my mouse. I'll also get the finger icon on this as well, but there are certain things that finger icon won't appear on. So I love using buttons to make sure I get that kind of a thing. But notice that the hover fill is using a function called color fade. And basically it is grabbing the color from my theme. I picked a theme, which I'm going to show you a little thing that I'll probably let you know about so that you know. When you're picking a theme, because this is adjusting to the zoom of my screen, the theme can disappear from the ribbon. And I have difficulty seeing, so I have to zoom a lot. You'll notice that. But if I unzoom a little bit, you'll see the theme will come up. But I had picked the dark theme. And so it actually configured the RGBA of that in this function and said the hover fill will be 20% darker. So I believe positive numbers are lighter and negative numbers are darker. Let's give that a test. So we'll just do plus 20%. Sorry, we'll just do 20% because you don't need a plus sign. It looks like it's lighter. And basically that's kind of like what I do sometimes if I forget which one is lighter and which one is darker. It's just try it and see which one I like better. So negative numbers are darker. And so that helps me kind of stay within my color theme and yet let someone know that they've gotten to the right place. You know, they've reached their destination without any issue. All right. So that's one of my favorite. Changing the hover fill sometime will help things to show up better. I also want to point out that you have display mode is where I'm trying to go here. Display mode. And basically display mode can be used to prevent someone from using a button for a short period of time. So right now the display mode is edit. And so if I change the display mode, which I can do in the advanced properties as well, but I'm used to working up here in the formula bar. So I'm just going to go to the display mode of this button and change it to disabled, which is what people do often with buttons. They will set it to disabled, which means I can't use it. Can anyone in the chat kind of tell me why I might want to disable a button? I'd love to see your ideas in the chat real quick. Throw your idea as to why I might want to disable a button. Brian's over there watching too, so you got Brian's attention. While you're thinking about that, and I will give you some ideas in case you don't come up with any, but I use that relatively often. So that's one of my favorite properties. Another property that you have that I adore is the visible property. So I can decide a button's visible only when it's needed. So I think, one thing that my design team has taught me is that people have a limited amount of cognitive load that they can handle. So how much stuff can I process on a given screen? So when I can minimize the choices they have or minimize what they need to be looking at, I will. And so usually what I'll do is set this visible property based on something, right? So like, for instance, I can tell this icon here, right? I can do a little short variable here that says update context show button and set it to false. And then I can set the visible property of this button to true. So show button equals true. So now that button is going to only show when it's true. Right now it's false. So I click this. All right, I just do that again. Let's do that again. What did I do? Show button is false. I want to set that to true. So when I click on it, it becomes true. Sorry, I did that backwards. So now I click on this and the button is shown. Now I can also do like a toggle kind of a switch by saying show button is the opposite of whatever it is now. So I can use the little exclamation point to say opposite of what it is now, basically, and turn it on and off, toggle it. And so my tip here on this point is don't show buttons to people that it's not time for them to use, right? Show them the button when it's time for them to use it or in context with what they're doing. So who came up with some good ideas on when to disable a button? Brian, did anyone chat something?
Oh,
We had
there's no shortage.
There's a shortage.
Like
Okay.
20.
Yes.
Okay. So my favorite,
Validation.
yes, and we can always have a little forum discussion on this on the side, but my favorite reason to disable a button is if I'm doing a form. Let's say I have a form in the screen that I've designed and I've placed the form in the screen, and I don't want them to forget required fields. So I won't let that button be enabled until all of those fields are filled in. So I'm kind of forcing them not to be able to try, because two reasons. One, if they hit that button and they haven't filled out the required fields, they're going to get a server-side error if that field is required at the source of the data. And people don't often like to read server-side errors. They're not very friendly. They say things like, visit your admin or access denied, which I always find to be quite insulting. So let's avoid giving them server errors by kind of helping them as they work only do what they can do. And so I'll disable the button until all of those fields are filled out. So I might have a visible property in here that says if is blank field required, then the visibility is false, right? And so you can actually nest that as well. So I love to do that, and not just with buttons, with anything. Yeah, my big suggestion to everyone when you're working with templates and when you're working in your apps is give people only what they need to see, need to know basis, and then they won't make mistakes. All right. Another thing I love about buttons, and if you look at this button right now on the screen, you'll notice that it is what do I say? It's kind of rounded on the sides, right? That's called a border radius. And if you look right over here, I'm going to show you on the right side of my screen, because there's something special about the one on the right. So where it says border radius, whatever number I type here is applied to all four corners. So top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right will all get the same border radius when I enter it here. Okay, so basically, let's say if I wanted to make this more rounded, I could set it to 20. You do have to click out of those boxes to make them like take. Notice how much more rounded it is now. If I say 30, it's even more rounded. Now, if I match the width, the height, and the radius, I'll actually get a circle. So let's try that. Width, height, and radius all being the same. I get a circle. So you most definitely can do circle buttons, right? That's kind of fun to do. But here's the deal, right? Now I'm going to make this, let's make this a width of 100, a height of 20, just for fun, and a border radius of 0, right? Let's make the height a little bit more, 50. And now you'll see, I'm gonna make it nice and big so you guys can see it. Now you'll see that the button is completely square. There are a lot of people that love the flat UI design kind of look and feel. You can go completely square if you want to, and it's not bad like it was when you were in high school. You can be square, it's fine, all right? Not a problem. Now, when you want to change radius only on one side though, you'll notice that instead of going to the properties panel, which is a real time saver, because it does all four corners at the same time. But if you just wanted to do the top and the bottom, you would go into the properties for radius, bottom left, bottom right, top left, and top right. Now, this is really cool because I didn't change those properties, but anything bolded in this property panel has been touched. PowerApps set all four of those for me just because I used the property panel on the right. So I love getting into the property panel on the right because it usually saves me quite a bit of time. I know in the beginning, so I kind of grew up with the formula bar, but I'm starting to direct myself over to the right because it does save time. All right, so let me show you some other examples here on these button looks. So this one on the top is like the standard button look. This one is the square. This one has like a 20 rounding to it, right? If I can see this better. This one has a 20 rounding on it. This one has a top left, top right of 300 and a bottom left, bottom right of 100. And don't write all this down because I'm going to give you a link to a page where you can become the master of buttons. If that's a goal in your life, you can have it tomorrow. And it will have everything you need about buttons, all right? And you can even kind of make these kind of different looks. I think this looks like a tab. So if I were doing tabs, look how easy it would be to make a tab using buttons. And I have my on select, I'd have my hovers, I'd have everything I need related to buttons, visibility, the whole 9 yards. Now I've done a couple of examples of what I might do with a button. One of the most popular actions of a button is when you navigate somewhere, right? So you don't have to fill out a navigation formula anymore. That was old school, I guess, a year ago. Now you can just click action and drop down the navigate here and then pick the screen you want to go to. And it will go there, right? Now, if it's the first screen, it'll just fill that out for you without you even clicking. But you can select any screen here and it will fill out the formula for you and also pick the transition for you. So I really love that. You know, you don't have to anymore worry about remembering how to write navigation functions. And I would always forget to write screen transition, so I love it, right? So now that button is automatically, no work on my part needed, going to go to the next page, okay? So I really love that. All right, so let's keep going so I don't run out of time. This one here has what we call counts. So actions are just like navigate, do this thing. Then behaviors affect the state of the app, right? So in this case, a navigate does also affect the state because you're going to a different screen. You could be changing your colors. You could be changing, you could be setting properties in variables. So these actions and behaviors are typical. But what Todd did earlier, and what we'll do in many cases, is use buttons to perform calculations. And there might be performing those calculations behind the scenes in addition to submitting the data. So don't hesitate to combine actions into a single button, which I'll show you. But on this one, I'm just having it update a variable so that the number for total goes up. I put a label over here so you can see the number for total, and over here it'll reset it back to 0. But I'm going to hit this. Notice that the number is 1. I actually have a little icon that shows if its total is 1. If I click it again, there's 2. Another icon appears, and if you notice on the bottom, I even have the text of the next button changing based on what the sentiment is, right? So here's a frown, and the total is 3. Here's a sad face, and the total is 4. And you would not believe just how easy that was to do. I can reset it back to 0 just by clicking the reset. So let's look at some of the things I did there. Since I claimed it's easy, let's see if I was lying. All right. So for the on select of the button, I have a simple update context variable, and this is a contextual variable, so it's for this screen. And basically it's saying whatever total is, every time you click on it, add 1. So it'll just keep adding the number 1 to total. Now, in order for them to know what this button is going to do, I put the text property in here that says add total. So text property is really important also for accessibility. Remember, when you're working to enable everyone to use your apps, you need to have high contrast between your buttons and your background, and you need to have it very clear what that button is going to do, because they'll have screen readers sometime that'll be reading them the text. So make sure that your text is clear. My recommendation is to stick with 1 to 2 words at the most. And if you're curious on best practices, you just go to Microsoft UI Fabric, right, which is the UI Fabric for all of Microsoft developers, and that can include you as a Power App maker, because you want to also have good practices. And up here at the top, you have styles, and you have a variety of assistance with things, right? So if I take icons, it'll start to tell me some ways I need to take care of icons. I'm pretty sure in styles also, I'm sorry, I want to go to components, and here is buttons under basic inputs. If you go to the button page, and whether you're a developer or not, please take a look at this page, because it has a great set of do's and don'ts. And these are standards, best practices that we have learned at Microsoft based on the telemetry we get from people. What is working the best? What is not working? We collaborate all that information and we throw them into best practices. So whether you're developing your code with JavaScript or you're using PowerApps, these do's and don'ts still apply. So notice, this is what I just said to you a minute ago. Make sure the label conveys a clear purpose for the button, right? So don't be too ambiguous about your button. I like what it says here. Don't use OK unless it's really like, it's really obvious, because if it's an error, for instance, nobody wants to click OK because errors are just not OK, right? And so there's a great guidance in here on what to do and not to do with buttons. It also shows you some simple guidelines for how to lay out your buttons. Don't get too rainbow-ish, because color and weight of a button indicates to a person where they should click. So if they see a darker button versus a lighter button, they're going to head towards that darker button, right? And if they're all dark and they're all different colors, they don't know where to go. So I'll leave you that link so that you can go and look at that UI Fabric and get some tips. All right. Now, basically for resetting total, I just set it back to 0 under the icon that we use for reset. And most of our icons, we try to name them in something logical so that you can see. I use the reload icon. So I think of it as reset too, but you could use whatever you want, and then you would just set that total back to 0. Now, what about those smiley faces? I know you're wondering, how did you do that maybe? So I'll put them back so that you can see them. and then I'll click on them so you can see what's going on with them. So the smiley face number 1 has a visible property that says that the total is greater than 0. Guess what the next one says? I'm hoping you're guessing while I'm going there. It says total greater than 1. And all of you on the call probably exactly know what I would put in the third one, total greater than 2. Now you can do whatever you'd like, but as I was doing that and the total was going up, their visible property was kicking in, and that behavior showed up on the screen. Now, as far as this text, so you can dynamically change the button text. Now, you know how I love this? I'm going to tell you why I love this so much. Because those of you that don't know this, write this down. PowerApps performs better with less controls and more. So we minimize the number of controls per screen. We automatically improve performance. So I might not need 2 buttons. I might be able to use 1 button that changes its purpose based on what's going on. All right. So how is that text property being driven here? Let's go to the text property and let's look at it. I'm using a switch function. Those of you that haven't seen switch, it's a lot like if, right? So basically it's saying when the case switches, so we're switching a case, and what's the driver of the case? It's the total variable, right? So since the driver is total, when the total is 0, then it should say this. When the total is 1, it should say that. When the total is 2, it should say that. Really easy, right? So I didn't even go as far as using lookups and creating collections in this case, because actually the lookup call might actually make it take longer, right? We wouldn't be able to perceive it. But when you have a whole lot of calls going on in your apps, you want to try to make them as efficient as possible, right? And so think about things like this. But here I'm dynamically switching the text of a button. Has anybody ever done that before? Give me a ping in the chat if you have. I'm not the only crazy person that will sometimes set buttons dynamically, the text on the button. Now, this down here, just show you this. So I'm going to put a zip code in here. Let's put Microsoft's zip code in there. And I'm going to hit this. Now, when I hit it, I did 2 things. All right, I'm going to put 2 zip codes in there just for fun. 98. This is my zip code. Those of you that want to visit me at my house. Okay, so now what I have done when I click on that button, and that button probably does not have good text. The text on that button is really to help me remember what I'm teaching you. So, but I don't think any button would ever say reset control. It might say add zip code, right? Or something better than reset controls, which is a reminder to Audrey. So what I did here is I created a collection called collect call numbers. I love, just kind of me personally, all my collections are named with the prefix of call. And that way I can recognize that in the formula bar easily. So all my galleries start with gal, all my collections start with call. And then I can always recognize them when I'm writing formulas, which I do a lot because I like to write formulas. That's fun for me. And then whatever they put in that zip code box is now going to go into that collection. Now, what's interesting, you guys that haven't noticed this, we color code the items in the formula bar to match what it highlights down here, so that you can validate you've put the right control in that formula. You see how it is bordered in green to show me what I'm talking about. It's really helpful to remember that. Now, after I do that, and here's the key when you talk about let's do multiple actions in one click, I put a semicolon in between these 2 because after it adds the collection, I want it to reset that field so it's empty again. They don't have to type again, right? And so I do a reset right there, right? And this is common. Now, if you're in Europe and certain areas, you may have a semicolon instead of our comma here, which means you'll have a double semicolon here. So we'll help you remember where to go look and find out what your regional formula punctuation is. But in this case, I'm using comma between my parameters. If you're ever curious and you're in a function, what's the parameters? Just look up, click right after the open paren and look up, and it will tell you what the parameters are. And when you go after the commas, it will tell you what you're up to. So like right now it says I'm supposed to give the collection name, and it defines what's a collection, right? And then if I go after the comma, then it tells me, oh, I want an item now. What's an item? And it defines that for me. So hold us accountable to this. If you're ever clicking in a formula bar around a formula and you don't get help like that, then post it in the forum. Let us know. It means we need to fix that. All right. Now, when I put that value into the collection, I had to hit .text because I wanted the value, not the control, but the value that they typed. However, when I reset the text input box, I don't need text because I want to actually reset the control itself. So really cool things. Now, last thing I'm going to show you, this was over here, it just clears the collection so that there's no more zip codes in my collection. And that formula is just very simply clear the collection name and it goes bye-bye, everything in it. Now, last thing, you can click a button from a button, or you can click a button from a formula. So I'm going to click this button and it's going to click the add total. So I'm going to clear this and now I'm going to click this. It's going to click the add total button. So I'm making this button click that button. Now, this is my last tip for today. So let me explain why. So here, just by saying select and the button name, which in this case is button rectangle, I have clicked that button. This is useful, guys, not necessarily under a button, but anywhere else. So let's suppose this button is resetting a bunch of controls or setting a bunch of variables that you need to do often in your app. Go ahead, put that in a button, hide the button, and then in your formulas, just say select that button. So you're kind of creating a macro, right? You created the button, you put everything you wanted it to do whenever you want to do it in one place, right? And now you can refer to that set of commands or the set of actions just by saying select that button. All right. Now, you always want to be careful when you do stuff like that to put notes in your back of your thing with some notes in it so that you can see, the other people that get to your app, they know about that, right? So you want to document things like that because nobody will know what that hidden button is for. And you know what they'll do? They'll delete it. So that's the risk there. If you're sharing work with other people, you have to kind of make that thing obvious. Now, something I have done instead of saying make it invisible is I'll say make it visible to me and the people who are building this app so that only the people who are building the app will see that thing when the app is in edit mode, but people who are running it won't see it. So we don't have to remember to set it as invisible because it's only visible to us by default. Okay, now last thing I want to say about colors, this is a place I want to go. Sometimes I go to these sites that help you put together color palettes. And I will actually use the color palettes as I build things. And let me show you where I used it on this one. I'm going to go back and let's see. This place here, there's a button in the middle of the screen. If I click it, it pops out a bunch of buttons, right? And so I actually can color these buttons using that palette. So sometimes I will do that where I'm coloring buttons. Here, I'm actually using the hover to focus and make that button the priority so you can see. And I might write a bunch of text in that button or whatever. But I'm using the hover to set that. And so I want to be careful. I think I ran out of time, Dana, didn't I?
We've got a couple more minutes, so yeah, you can keep going unless you want to take some of the questions. Totally up to you.
Yeah, I think I should take questions because I could, this is really fun stuff and I can talk about it for a long time, but I want to make sure I grab your questions. Any questions? You can also, I think you can speak, you can unmute yourself if you want.
Yep, if you have a question,
Should I
and I know
back to the rest of our slide deck?
Sure, if they have no questions.
I've been answering a lot along the way. So has Brian.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, awesome. Thank you, Todd.
You're welcome. All right. Can everybody see my screen again?
Yes.
That was great, Audrey. I even learned something out of that one too today. Thank you. Um,
Oh, that's good.
we've collected a bunch of slides here that you'll see in follow up to the presentation. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them, but they talk about how to ramp up on the PowerApps sample templates and where you can find videos and all kinds of things and information on what they are and how to extend them. We also have more ramp up resources here, including a video of that like functionality you just saw, and then details about the buttons that Audrey talked about. And then we have some recent news to share here. And if you haven't seen the December product updates for PowerApps, we encourage you to go check those out and see all the new cool things that came out in December. And then there's also the Power Platform World Tour. We encourage you to go to learn about that as well, and a great learning opportunity for you with PowerApps too. And then this is going to be a part of our call every time as well as our community contributions. And we would plan to give a shout out to anybody who's made a great contribution inside of, oh, somebody else started sharing. May take that back. This will be part of our call every month where we give a shout out to anybody out in the community who has done something awesome with PowerApps and contributed to the community and shared their knowledge. And Audrey, do you want to talk to these real quick?
Yes. So these two things are amazing. So first, the coding standards. I big huge thanks to Todd. Todd and Pat. Pat was hugely instrumental in making sure that they thought about the most common questions, like, I don't know when to do this, but I'm not sure how to do that, and I'm trying to get better organized. And so they took all of these questions and their awareness of you guys challenges, and then they started reaching out to all of the subject matter experts and asking for more content, that whatever wasn't already in their head, to pull out more information. And the contributors in this list are from all over the world, right? So, and they're not just Microsoft employees, and this is such a collaboration of best practices. We want to do this again, so please keep us in the loop when you have best practices to share, please. Now, getting to that, we had our community awards ceremony, which I think was just last week, and we had a bunch of winners for that. And so we now are affording people community awards, which means that if you're a mentor on the community, you're answering questions, you're providing solutions, you're being kudoed by others, you can actually be nominated as a community mentor. Right now, there are only 3 in the whole world, and I'm not one of them. There are 3 community members. They all have their own custom t-shirt and everything. So it's kind of cool. We also had a social innovation award where we are recognizing people for being innovative in social media. So your YouTube channels, your Twitter feeds, all of that stuff. We want to recognize you for your contributions there. So keep in mind that we're kind of keeping our eye out for all of those highly inspiring mentors out there that take some of these tips and others that they have in their heads and they start sharing it with other people. Because the best thing about PowerApps is what a wide community we have of people who love to share with each other. So no, the community awards are for anybody that's not at Microsoft. Microsoft cannot win a community award. Only you guys can win community awards. And by the way, they didn't just win You're Great. One guy won an Odyssey, which is a virtual reality headset for Microsoft Mixed Reality, and one guy won an Xbox. So it was exciting. Check out the link. We'll also provide that so you can see who the winners are. Dr. Eric was the winner for the community first place, and Paul and Ashley were the winners for first place in social innovation. So I'm sure you've heard of these people because they have been highly instrumental in mentoring our community. And dynamic communities, we want you on board too. We're all one happy family. So you can pick up the recording whenever you'd like. If you use the hashtag PowerAppsCC, you automatically enter yourself into a raffle for the first quarter of 2019. This raffle will end on March 31st, and the person who gets the winning raffle, which will be randomly selected, that person will win an Xbox. So the more times you hashtag PowerAppsCC, the more raffle tickets you will have. Add it to your calendar so that you can be here with me. You're not missing out. I want to see you here. I'm going to find a way to have a better mic, etc. And you guys have an awesome week. I'm sorry to go over 4 minutes. Dana, is that okay?
Yes, that's great. Some of our calls go over even more than that. So if anyone wants to stay and you have a couple extra minutes and they have extra questions, we can definitely stay on for a few minutes.
Yes, I can stay on
Longer.
too if you have questions. Sure.
Okay.